Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Και κυρίες και κύριοι, ευχαριστώ. Δεν ξέρετε τι μεγάλη χαρά είναι για μένα για να δω. Είναι για αυτό το βιβλίο, το έγραψα για 10 χρόνια. Και όλη η ζωή μου από 1970 είμαι φοιτήτρια της Ελλάδος και της Κρήτης. So I'm now going to, I've got it all written down about Kalia's life in English, so I'm going to introduce her in English. But she is a most amazing person. And for me, it's such a great pleasure to hear these songs which I learned in Crete from men. I hear her singing them in her beautiful voice. Kalia Baklitzanaki, she's a singer-songwriter, and she's a multi-instrumentalist, so she's got a Cretan lute there, but she's also got the name?
The Cretan Diabolian recorder.
Okay. And she plays all these different instruments. She has performed at WOMAD and the BBC Proms. She's performed for some reason for the Prince of Wales. And you can hear her music in films and documentaries and even in video games. But she's also, she's got a BA from SOAS in ethnomusicology and an MA from Roehampton in ethnochoreology, which I'd never heard of. But she was born, I think, in a village outside Ayos. But she's had most of her growing up life since 18 in England. So she is between, and she has got the most lovely voice, and we are very honoured because it is the first night since her daughter was born 3 years ago that she has done a concert outside. And this is the first night that Daddy is putting her to bed, I think. So I'm particularly honoured. So this book, as Agatha says, it is full of surprises. So I don't want to tell you, I don't want to give any surprises away. But it concerns the synagogue of Chania, which is now what it looks like. This is what it looks like now. There's the website of it. It was originally a Venetian church, little Venetian church. When the Turks besieged Chania and then it got cracked. When the Turks took over from the Venetians, they gave the church to the Jews for an extra synagogue, and they took down the ghetto walls. And this is what it looks like inside today. And during the occupation, in Britain, most people, when they think of Crete during the war, they think of Patrick Leigh Fermor in the mountains. But actually, all the citizens of Crete lived through, a lot of them in the cities. And the cities was where you constantly saw the Germans, of course. And there's a wonderful little book which I found in a Chania bookshop called The Leaden Sky Years, written by a 13-year-old schoolboy. And I think that gives a real flavour of what it was like living in the cities, living through the 3 weeks of bombing. But, of course, the mountains were freedom. And I just want to read a passage. In this book, my narrator, short for Ariadne, perhaps, is a painter. She was born in Chania, and her parents run a little bed and breakfast place. But she went to art school at 18. She married somebody here, and now her mother's very ill, and she's gone back. And as far as she was concerned, her mother was Orthodox. They had Easter, all sorts of things. And then she begins to hear other things about what happened. But first of all, she hears about her father's life, that things she didn't really know, how he had been with the Andates in the mountains. And this is, I'll just read a little passage. His brother Yorgos came from a family of lira singers, wedding singers. And so he's in the mountains too, and it is Easter, and it is very cold. On Easter Sunday, With the cave wrapped in mist like icy wool, they sat around a roasting kid. "Sing, Yorgachi," said Kyriakos. Yorgos looked out across the mountains and flung back his head, and his voice floated out into the mist. On the edge of a cliff stands an eagle, asking the sun to melt the snow on his damp back. Even as a boy, Papa knew that eagle was the rebel heart of Crete, the Cretan warrior longing for spring when he could go down the valley, kill the Turks and shout, "Crete is free." Yorgos's voice carried all Crete with it, the wounds, the knives, the reckless courage. It was grandfather waving his pistol, everything Papa had ever known and loved before Sarah. Because the girl he is in love with is a Jewish girl, and she's now in Chania, which is occupied by the Germans. So here is the Ayatos song that Yorgos sang in the mountains. you can see how the boy realizes, Ilia natile, Crete, rise up, sunrise. A lot of this novel is concerned with how well do you know your mother, and if your mother has withheld from you something absolutely central to her identity and your identity, what do you feel when you discover it? Do you feel angry? Do you feel hurt? Do you feel you don't know her or yourself? So those things have to be discovered. And finally, she does get to hear a little bit of her story. So here, part of this book is a love story. And here is a girl called Sarah, a Jewish girl called Sarah. They all went to, it was a very mixed environment in the Jewish quarter of Chania. I'm sure those of you who know Chania know the area. It's now the most touristy central part of the old town. And they all went to the same school. They all talked Greek. The Jews also learned Hebrew, but they shared everything else. And so here they are in the playground during the occupation with the Germans patrolling outside, and they are learning the Sirtos Chaniotikos. Now boys, first of all they're doing the Pentuzali, sorry. Now boys, shouted the teacher, the Pentuzali. Remember our hero, Daskala Yanis, danced it the night before his great last battle against the Turks. Thodoros strode to the front. Amos and Emmanuel, who looked so alike no one could tell them apart, mock staggered to their places. The other boys fooled around, swapping positions. Only quiet little Philippos stood calm till everyone was ready. Then Thodoros led the boys out, leaping high in the air and smacking his ankle. Now the Sirkos Chaniotikos, said Kalia Baklitzanaki. A dance for Chania and for Crete. This is how we won freedom for the Turks, children, by moving together. It is a war dance in disguise. Freedom or death, yelled Amos, or maybe Emmanuel. The end of the dancing was the end of term. Everyone surged out of the yard, longing to get out of long black winter socks, long-sleeved shirts, prickly skirts and trousers. At home, she ran upstairs, tore off her uniform and looked out of the window and saw a thin boy carrying a plank as if it were a feather. She put on a blue blouse, went out onto the upper landing and saw him in the hall below, looking up. He had deep hazel eyes. When he laughed, he watched for her to laugh too. Was the rest of him as sunburnt as his arms? Each time they met, she felt something happening between them. When she gave him a glass of water, her knuckle brushed his hand, and she felt a shock, as if something had given way within her. She found herself in a confused feeling of continuous surprise. Through all the hours she didn't see him, something kept shifting that changed they were together next time. So things go on. He goes to the mountains, and the great threat of the mountains is Aios prison. I don't know if you have read the Cretan Runner, which Lee Firma edited, but in that I saw references to Aios prison in that. It says it's a poultry farm. I mean, I went there. Nobody had ever gone there. But this is where they put the Jews when they rounded them up. It's still a prison. The guard wasn't very pleased when I walked around it. He said, get out of there. But for 9 days in the middle of the summer, they were put there with their heads shaved. And then they were put on this boat, the Tanais. And they were going north, of course, to Auschwitz, but 12 hours out from Heraklion, the boat was torpedoed and sunk by a British submarine. So that's the story. But of course, that was happening in the middle of a war, and with so many other deaths and catastrophes that it hardly was noticed, and certainly because the Brits didn't say for about 20 years what had happened. Nobody knew where they'd gone. But I thought this was appropriate for one of the great Cretan laments, Oza Varonta Sidera, Varonta Mavrarucha, for Kalia to sing this. The person who restored the synagogue and rescued it, I think there's somebody here who went to Chania in 65, and then at that point there was a rather ropey little nightclub called Synagogie in the area, but it was completely tumbled down. And he was half Jewish. His mother was Turkish Jewish and his father was a Cretan. And he got the money, he funded it, and it's now incredibly a working synagogue, which is real for, he said, prayer, reconciliation, and remembrance. And many people Orthodox, Catholic, Muslim, as well as Jews go there for services, and it's become a very, very special place for research and contemplation. And these two girls this is the only photo of any of the people who were in that boat when it went down. Sarah and Judita Cunio. And how we got the photograph, Nikos was sitting in the synagogue one night. People will come in there and tell him extraordinary stories. And one day a woman came in. She was Greek, but she was from America. And she said, I don't know if you can help me. I come from Chania, and I was at school with my school friends, and I saw the Germans take them away, and one of them called up saying, "Will you keep my books for me, my school books?" So I said I would. "And can you tell me, do you know anything about where I can find her now?" So he looked at her, and he had to tell her what had happened. And she was very shaken, and they sat down and talked. And she later wrote out for him an eyewitness account of the Germans taking all the Jews that morning, 5 a.m. And she produced this photograph of her friends. And this is one of the things, the stories and the pictures that helped me write the book, made me write the book. And in fact, I haven't used them, but I've used Sarah, the name. I find it incredibly emotional to see it. But the stories are it's a very sad story. One other girl did survive, but that comes in the book, and you can read about it in the acknowledgements. But it was not a happy survival. And underneath the book, there is my sense of the Eratokritos. And so I changed the story enough to give it a sort of a happier ending for some of the characters. And of course, Eratokritos is the great Greek epic of lovers parted, and then struggle and survival, and then union at the end. And Nikos had started a commemoration, so the boat went down in June, and so every June people gather, all sorts of faiths, at the synagogue, and they say out the names. Because the Germans were so organized, they had the census, they had the names of the people who died on that boat. So we all put little lights for each name, and it's a very moving occasion. But I wanted to read you a little bit about Ozavara and Tastidara and the blackness. This is because having heard all the stories, she feels that now perhaps she can paint. She hasn't been able to paint. She's been drawing, but not painting, since she's realized so much new about her past and herself and her family. She paints for her brother, who owns a fancy hotel on the coast along from Chania. And she's painting the sea. And gradually, the muscle of each wave, the loss of the lines of the currents, violet, emerald, indigo, feel more sinister to me as well as beautiful. This sea drowned my family, the family I never knew. I look at blue and see black. Looking at it before it's finished, I know what it needs. And next day I add 3 very small, distant figures on the headland. Next day, I leave it for Nikos. It's not a big canvas, 30 by 20 inches, just an empty bay, but something in it feels immensely sad. Rembrandt said, "A painting is complete when it has the shadows of a god." The colours here vibrate, but every ripple has a grin of dark. Even the cloudless sky has black in it. Cretan black, the black of knives, the black of loss, like the song Nikos sings, heavy as iron are the black clothes I wear for people I loved. I have painted a memorial. I feel a pang at parting for it, but I did it for my brother, and maybe it wouldn't have worked if I hadn't. I leave it there. Early next morning I find a text from his wife. "What have you done, Pedimu?" We got to bed at 3. He saw it and burst into tears. He adores it. Thank you. So we move on from there. But I wanted to, I'm not going to tell you, I mean, I will if you ask, but I don't want to deprive you of the fun of hearing not fun, but the insights of the surprises which Agatha mentioned. But I promise you that as well as the tragedies, there is happiness. Perhaps I'll read you the last little bit, because it ends with the beginning of COVID. And somebody learns a new word, koronios. He doesn't know what that means. At 6 every evening, like everyone in Greece, we turn on the TV to see two quiet men sitting several meters apart, a soft-spoken professor of diseases, and a civil defense minister. They tell us calmly what is happening, and we do what they say. The hashtag is menumespiti, we stay home. We have a very low death rate, very few deaths. But the British news I get on my phone sounds angry and confused. There, the government watchword to the public is a command. Stay home, stay alert. What use is stay alert? They have the highest death rate in Europe. Here, politics can be violent, but we are always communal. And we have never believed we were immune. We live in earthquake country. We know anything can get you. Enemies, empires, spirits of the air, the evil eye, and certainly the Meltemi. We know we need protection. God's word at your door, a smoke cross at Easter, a sword of healing in the mosque. Keep a goldfinch against the plague. Break a pomegranate on your doorstep at New Year. Use a face mask and do as the doctor says. So let's go back to the Eratokritos to celebrate Crete's sense of getting back together.
Άκουσες άρετουσα μου τα θλιβερά μαντάτα, ο Κύρις σου με εξόρισε στις ξενιτιάς στη στράτα. 4 μέρες μοναχά μ' αφήκε να λιμένω κι από κι να ξενιτευτώ, πολλά μακριά να πιένω και πώς θα σ' αποχωριστώ και πώς θα σου μακρύνω και πώς θα κάνω δίχως σου στο χωρισμό εκείνο. Παρακαλώ θυμού καλά ό,τι σου λέω τώρα και γρήγορα μη σε βγω σου μακρένα από τη χώρα κι ας τάξω κακορίζικος πως δεν σ' είδα ποτές μου μα ένα χέρι αυτουμένο εκράτω κι σβήσε μου Καλιά Χωσέ